Welcome to the virtual read-along of Women of Color in Tech, a blueprint for inspiring and mentoring the next generation of technology innovators. Daniel, you'll be very excited to hear that 7th and 8th grade girls are getting exposed to lessons learned in the tech industry. Last week, we talked about building skills, whereas this week, we'll talk about demonstrating those skills. We're being joined this week, ladies, by Daniel Aguirre. Daniel is a community organizer, Science Festival Accelerator Advisory Board Chair, and STEM consultant. He's led community-focused collaborative initiatives for over 10 years, and creating the conditions to discuss and address the digital divide, crisis teaching, and community healing is his area of expertise. Daniel, welcome to the discussion.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So, we're not trying to put you on the spot, but what do you think about the book? What do you think about the chapter?
As I was reading chapter 7, I kept thinking, why didn't I have this when I was a kid? It's just, there are so many things that we take for granted, skills that we've learned along the way, and environments that we've learned how to navigate by stumbling through them and just learning those lessons and picking ourselves up and dusting off and going, whoa, I'm not going to do that again. And so it was really great to see all these really valuable tools and like very tangible steps, like do this thing here, because I think a lot of people need that, like, what is it? For me, as I was reading this chapter, I kept thinking that there was something missing for me, because as an introvert, it's really hard to go into thinking about a job interview, right? And applying for a job, because you're overthinking every single thing, you're negotiating every single word. And so it was great to read this and to see those tangible steps, and then to see some, like, listen, this is a potential pitfall. Look at it, right? Reflect on it. Yeah, those were mine.
Thank you.
I love that. And Susanne, if you want to respond, feel free. I'm going to ask you, what do you want to get from this chapter?
Sure. Well, Daniel, thank you. I was being very intentional about having not so much talking about strategy, but actual like tactics, things that you can do like right now, because I think sometimes some people may have like a plan of action already ready to go, and others maybe not. So just giving people ideas of where they can possibly start. And you're absolutely right. Like at first, when I was conceiving the chapter, I was thinking, oh well, everybody knows this. And I'm like, no, they don't. Like, there are people that are older than me that, don't quite, know this either. And there's still some things that I'm learning. So, I've been very lucky and privileged to be able to know these things and to share it with other people. So I'm glad that you picked up on that, and thank you for the warm praise. I think for me, what I wanted to get across to the readers is thinking a little bit more broadly about how one becomes a professional in their field. We spend a lot of time talking about resumes and job interviews, and those are very important. But you want to be more cognizant that depending on where you're going, there might be better vehicles to show the type of professional that you are. So if you're someone that's in software development, you may want to have your own GitHub profile. If you're someone that's into design, maybe having your own personal website makes a little bit more sense than just having a one-page resume. So just really thinking that a little bit more broadly, and then touching on how social media, I'm by no stretch of the imagination a social media maven. Like I'm just putting that out there. But I do realize how powerful of a tool it can be in furthering what people think about you as a particular a professional in a particular field. So that was what I was hoping to get out of the readers. I'm hoping will get out of this particular chapter.
Yeah, and I think that there's also a lot of entry points for digging into certain areas and having conversation around certain areas. So like one of the notes that I wrote down for myself is one of the things that I struggle with is, and you talk about it, it's highlighting your successes in your resume or in your LinkedIn profile or whatever. For me, that's so hard. Like talking about myself, tooting my own horn is just, I'm not good at it. And when I put it down in writing, it feels so disingenuous, and I'm just kind of like, ew, right? But one thing that I have found is that if I start writing the successes as they happen in my experience, and I write them down with as much detail, I can save that. And then later on, when I'm updating my resume, I'm looking for a new opportunity, whatever it might be, I don't have to pull it from the back of my memory somewhere, right? I can go back to it and I have it documented. I can see why that was a success, like what got me to acknowledge that was a success. I think that's such a great place for young people to have a conversation about what does success look like for you, because that is an opportunity to show employers new ways of measuring success. So I thought, there were so many of those little entry points in there that I'm like, ooh, we need to have a conversation about this. Ooh, look at this right here. So I had a few of those that kept popping up for me, but I thought that one in particular was one.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on what you had said about, kind of documenting your progress as you go. Because as I was trying to kind of enter the minds or perspectives of our 7th and 8th grade readers, and thinking that, while they might be looking at this chapter, a lot of these, topics or skills may seem very adult, for you, or for them. And I think some of them are, but the act of documenting your skills and experiences, or resume building, I think is becoming increasingly important at a younger age. I definitely felt this when I was applying for, summer programs and stuff like that in high school, or applying to college, resumes needed there. Even when I'm taking a gap year right now, and as I'm applying to different volunteer things, they want some kind of resume. Now that's not to say that, you speaking to our readers now, should feel pressured to fill your resume, because then that kind of loses its authenticity. But it is to say that, you should start recognizing the things that you're already accomplishing, and see that, that skill is relevant. So, as an idea, you could even talk about your, experience at our camp in GLIST this summer, kind of following the one tip that I really liked from the resume section, which was just getting your content down first. You can talk about the skills that you required, or, your experience in those 2 weeks, what it was like virtually, or what you had learned. Their final projects, our readers did end up having final coding projects, because that is an accomplishment. And even, saving your final project somewhere. I mean, right now it's up in the cloud, but saving that and having that documentation, I think you can start seeing relevance in that even right now. And with that said, making sure to keep your documentation up to date throughout your journey, as per the book's advice, is especially important if you are starting at a younger age, because you will have so many more experiences that are, even more relevant in the years to come. So I really like what you had mentioned about kind of that documentation. And I think that's probably like as a step one, like if you were to take something away from that right now, again, the U is towards our readers. I think the documenting is one of them. But off of that, I was wondering if you thought if there were any other, sections of the chapter that you think could be, currently relevant to our readers, their age, and kind of their initial journey in tech.
The subject matter is geared towards a little bit of a older age range. I think the message that I'm trying to convey is something that should be instilled early and often, and that is being your own best advocate in your personal life and your career. Because while you'll have mentors and sponsors and people who will put you, high up and put you out there, you know your story best, you know your story well, and you're the person that's going to advocate the hardest for yourself. So I learned that lesson much later in life. I wish I had learned that sooner. So for the girls that are watching this, you are your best advocate, and start learning that self-advocacy is a really good thing.
I don't think you should sell yourself so short with the who's ready to read this and who might not quite be there. I think that this is the perfect time for these girls to like really start focusing on this, because it takes so long to develop those skills. Like, some of us didn't start till last week, right? So trying to really celebrate our successes and be able to talk about the work that we do in a way that accurately represents it. And so starting in 7th and in 8th grade, like, yes, like you should be thinking about that right now. And what I kept coming back to in your book is that these are things that are great conversation drivers for youth. Like for them to get into a space and have a conversation with each other about what this means, and then to invite people like us to help them navigate through that in practice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess like I try to be mindful, because when I imagine certain readers of the book, I think like, okay, they've made this conscious decision or they need some help. And when I think 7th and 8th grade, it's like, yes, absolutely should start thinking about this. I also want you to like you're still figuring a lot of things out. and I, just want to be like very open and nurturing, but you're absolutely right. Like, you still need to know this like earlier rather than later. And hopefully not by the time you turn like 35, 40, and yeah. Completely agree.
Totally. You have to learn how to advocate for yourself. That's not something you just know how to do. It takes practice. And so for me, an example is celebrating myself in writing is really hard for me to do. Like, I can't quite capture what I want to say because it sounds so icky, but I can record myself speaking it, right? And then I can turn on text to type and have that capture what I'm saying, right? And so that it's showing up in a way that feels more comfortable for me personally. But I think in terms of like other areas, I think something to lean into is the first impression section. And when does a first impression start and end? And I think that one of the things that we've been conditioned to a way that we've been conditioned to operate is to think that the first impression starts at the interview or at the phone screening, right? And then it ends at the end of the interview, and that's not true. I don't personally feel that that's where it starts or where it ends. I think when you're applying, it starts there. You start to make an impression. You start to tell a story about yourself at that point, right? And you're trying to get your listener to engage with you and to reach out to have a conversation, which to me is what the interview is. It's a conversation. I need to know that I want to work there as well, right? So I want to also choose you as my employer. And that is an impression that goes both ways. And I think that when you can shift your mind to looking at it that way, suddenly you can bring your guard down a little bit and it feels a little bit more comfortable. The other side of that coin is what happens to us after an interview is that we start to second guess everything. What did I say? Oh my God, I totally ruined that. And we are our own worst critic. And I think that we can stress ourselves out with that, especially at a young age when what everybody is going to say about you is super important. And yet when we're here where we are now as like professionals with longevity in a career, we're like, I need to be courageous and not worry about that so much. So I think it's important to not get hung up on how did I come across, but continue to move forward. Send that thank you note. If you feel like you messed something up, that doesn't mean that they're focusing on that thing, right? So I don't know, those were some things that were coming to mind.
Thank you. Susanne, as always, we really appreciate you as the author joining us in this space. Daniel, thank you for joining us. Melina, you and your GLIST girls are amazing. GLIST girls, enjoy this week's reading of Women of Color in Tech, a blueprint for inspiring and mentoring the next generation of technology innovators. Enjoy chapter 7.